On today's edition of the Locked On Eagles podcast, it's the My Guys episode, the offensive version. Who are the guys that Gino and I are pounding the table for in the 2024 NFL Draft?
You are Locked On Eagles, your daily Philadelphia Eagles podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's going on, Eagles fans? I'm Louis DiBiase, co-host of the Locked On Eagles podcast, Eagles analyst also over at Bleacher Report. Same with my co-host, Gino Camilleri, who's also our scouting director. On today's edition of the Locked On Eagles podcast, we're going through our My Guys for the 2024 NFL Draft, a day 1 and then a day 2/3 prospect for the offensive line, for receiver, running back, tight end, and quarterback. We thank you so much for making Locked On Eagles your first listen each and every day. Today's show is brought to you by LinkedIn Jobs. They help you find the qualified candidates you want to talk to faster. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedonnfl. That's linkedin.com/lockedonnfl to post your job for free. Terms and conditions do apply. So, you know, this is one of my favorite shows we do every single year because, of course, there's always guys that we feel very passionately about, for better or worse. I don't know why this is the first player that pops in my head, but in 2020, I would not shut up about KJ Hamler. Did not work clearly. He's on the Buffalo Bills practice squad. Sometimes it does work out. Lamar Jackson was my guy in 2018, but I love going through the My Guys. Today we're going to do offense. Tomorrow we'll do defense.
This is the time of year where our bias can kick in a little bit, and I don't really feel bad about it because in war rooms, everybody has their feelings, right? Everybody has a guy that they're kind of pounding the table for, and as ridiculous as it is, I think one of the great My Guy examples is J.J. Arcega-Whiteside, which led to a full-on 4-person vote inside of the NovaCare complex between him and Paris Campbell.
That was a thing, but
but that's what happens, man. When guys are set on their guys, set on their beliefs, set on what they believe that role could be for a player, that's where you get this situation for better and or for worse.
And there's always like day 3 My Guys too, right? I remember there was a year when we were really into running back where like Bruce Anderson from North Dakota State was a My Guy for me, or Darwin Thompson. I had both on the show from Utah State. So it can get like deep into the weeds too.
Especially for me in CGS, like a lot of those guys on day 3, I really get to know them. Like I know them as people. I get to hear their personality, and that's why it's hard to kind of separate like what they can do on the football field versus who they are as people. And that's why scouting and being Howie Roseman, you think it's a glitz and glamour job. It's a nut cutting type of job, man. Like you got to make some personal decisions that are going to piss some people off inside your war room, because you fall in love with these prospects, man. You're doing so much research. It's hard not to when you get infatuated with a guy and you can kind of envision what like Sidney Jones, for example, before he tears his Achilles. I'm like, oh, you draft this guy, you have a number 1 cornerback till the cows come home. And guess what happens? I mean, he doesn't turn into anything that we thought he could be.
How many My Guys have the Eagles drafted for you since we've done this podcast? Because for me, there's very few, honestly. I don't know if, Quez
John
Watkins.
Hightower.
Yeah, I was going to say, we both got our receiver
Jackson.
that year. You loved John Hightower. I loved Quez Watkins. Those were definitely My Guys.
I loved Teron Jackson that year, too. I couldn't believe they actually got him. Devontae, I think, is the clear number 1 for sure. Vinny Curry, I remember going into that draft and like I would just see things of him on NFL Network. I'm like, oh, this guy probably could fit in Philadelphia pretty well. And hey, they actually drafted him.
Kevon Wallace was one for me. Yeah, Miles Sanders at running back. So yeah, no, they've definitely participated sometimes in the Lou and Gino My Guy affair, but I think this year, I don't know, I think it's because in the past they've needed offense so much more, Gino. This year I feel like my passions are going more towards the My Guys at the defensive side of the ball, but there are some guys on offense that I'm still really hoping that the Eagles do target. We're going to start with the offensive line because I think that's the biggest need for the Eagles, both short-term and long-term. It's also probably the most likely prospect that we're going to be talking about early on in the draft. Like, could they go receiver, tight end early? Sure. Could they go running back or quarterback? Highly doubt it. I think the offensive line, especially at tackle, is where the My Guys are going to come from. Who for you? We're going to do a day 1 guy and then one player that's potentially a day 2 or day 3 pick. Who's your day 1 My Guy on the offensive line?
It really pains me to say it, but man, I think like Troy Fautanu is really built in a lab. Like, talk about balance, athleticism, everything that when I say these my guys, I see it through the Eagles lens. That's how I try to identify this. And that's why, like you just said, you kind of fall in love with guys at positions where the Eagles need. And me, like Jeff Stoutland, like you watch him on the field and you're just like, dude, this guy moves like a tight end, but he's as powerful as any offensive lineman. And I love versatility. You can play him at guard, you can play him at tackle. And it kills me that I'm talking about a Washington Husky in that way. But man, you get some of these Samoan cats, dude, like they are built in a lab literally to play offensive line. And him and Tylis Fuaga are two of them.
I was like, Fuaga is my other guy, but I actually had Troy Fautanu too. And I think it's because we have the same mindset here. We're thinking through an Eagles lens. We know that this is the style of lineman that would be handpicked for Jeff Stoutland. And also because I don't really want a long-term backup at tackle. If you want the heir apparent to Lane Johnson this year, I would also like that player to have the ability, if he beats out Tyler Steen, if that's the plan, to eventually play right guard this year, next year, depending on how long Lane Johnson plays. And Fuaga is that guy. And when you look at, again, he can just, the second and third level, like, he's very athletic. And that's compared to some of the bigger, more plotting guys, like you look at round 2 of Patrick Paul, or even of Marius Mims to a degree. Like, I think Fautanu just fits what the Eagles do. Like, that's just the kind of lineman they take.
It is. And Fautanu reminds me a lot of the Isaac Seumalo selection simply because of the versatility. And you're probably thinking, oh, you see the long hair. You're just saying, oh, they look alike. No. Like Isaac Seumalo played all 5 positions at Oregon State. He moved up and down that offensive line.
And he kind of did for the Eagles to a degree too.
Yes. Dude, I watched the replay of the Super Bowl last week when it was on NFL Network. Chance Warmack came into that game and played left guard for them. People forget about that. So the need to have multiple good offensive linemen is just something that the Eagles will always continue to invest in. And after Howie's discussions and talking about that they haven't really invested a lot in the offensive line, and it kind of makes sense of all of these little breadcrumbs that have kind of trailed to them taking a guy in round 1.
If you're going to wait, though, if you believe Lane Johnson does have at least 2 more years left in him, and I think he does at 34 years old, like I wouldn't be surprised if he's playing at a very high level at 36, 37. The question is, does he want to play for that long? If Howie Roseman does think that he'll play for multiple years, I would wait for day 2 or day 3. Jeff Stoutland has proven time and time again that he can develop those guys into high-end backups or very good starters. I look at a player from Missouri who had a really good week at the Senior Bowl. He's absolutely huge. Javon Foster. Like, if you can get this guy in rounds 4 through 7, Gino, that to me would be a steal as a reserve backup tackle who eventually could be a long-term starter if Stoutland develops him well. 449 pass blocking snaps last year, only 1 sack allowed. He had nearly an 86 run block grade according to Pro Football Focus. Like, that's a player that if Stoutland can get his hands on him, there's a lot of skills there.
I'm with you, but with a different player. I think Christian Haynes out of UConn,
it's a good one too.
Same thing, man. Like, just a very under the radar type of guy who's gone about this process in a very good way. He's just put together more and more good elements of did well at the Senior Bowl, does well at the Combine. He had good tape at a school that doesn't produce really good football in UConn, and that's saying a lot. And those are the type of guys, Lou, like you're not going to fill all of the positional traits. Like, they're not going to be great at all of them, but there's enough of, like, Christian Haynes' balance and his ability to just stay center and stay square. You could see Jeff Stoutland working with that. Like you just said with Javon Foster as well. Like, you see that size element. I was going to say Patrick Paul, but you kind of threw a little tongue-in-cheek thing. I love Patrick Paul just because I can see Stoutland developing.
Oh, the size and the reach is incredible with Patrick
and
Paul.
It's like if anybody's going to get his footwork ready to go, it's going to be Jeff Stoutland, right? But that's these type of guys, the Christian day 2 is just loaded with these type of players, man. Like, loaded with the Tyler type of selections. And I'm with you. It's like, as good as those guys are up top, I know how good my best positional coach is in Jeff Stoutland.
He survived 3 coaching changes.
What about the story how he told yesterday during the press conference where he's like, Stout starts studying all these guys last year, and he's like, Howie, I got a sleeper. And he's like, hey, Jeff, that guy's going in the top 10.
Yeah, right. Let me tell you about this guy nobody's heard of. His name is Joe Alt from Notre Dame.
Yeah, literally. It seems like a Stout guy.
For sure. That's why, I mean, again, it really depends on what you feel about Lane Johnson's future. And Howie Roseman talked about that yesterday during his press conference, that you don't just replace a guy like Lane, but He did talk about, too, the benefit of having a guy like Cam Jurgens sit behind Jason Kelsey for a few years, and I think that hints that they'll probably go tackle early, but there's a lot of options late, and Stoutland has proven time and time again that he can develop those players. Let's switch to skill positions coming up next. Receiver and tight end, my guys, right here on the Locked On Eagles podcast.
As we roll along, this episode of LOE is brought to you by our friends over at LinkedIn. When you're hiring for your small business, you want to find quality professionals that are right for the role. Heck, we're talking about the draft. That's exactly what they're doing. And that's why you check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs has all the tools to find the right professionals for your team faster and for free. It isn't just a job board. It helps you find professionals you can't find anywhere else. And those who aren't actively searching for a new job might be open to the perfect role. In a given month, over 70% of LinkedIn users don't visit any other leading job sites. So you're not looking on LinkedIn, you're looking in the wrong place. LinkedIn knows small businesses are wearing many hats and you might not have the time or resources to hire. Like scouting right now, you got to have all of those stones uncovered. All of our friends today, you are going to go to linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL and you are going to be able to post your job for free. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL. We thank LinkedIn for sponsoring the Locked On Eagles podcast. Terms and conditions do apply.
We thank you so much for making Locked On Eagles your first listen each and every day. Guys, exciting news. Our NFL Mock Draft Live is releasing today at 7 p.m. Eastern Time, streaming on the Locked On Sports Today 24/7 streaming channel. You can find it on YouTube or the free Amazon Fire TV channels app. Find the ultimate 6-episode series tonight at 7 p.m. Eastern Time to hear who the local experts of Locked On, including Gino and I, are picking for every NFL team, including the Birds, with live reactions from local college football experts and even our fantasy football guys. The Locked On NFL Mock Draft on April 17th, 7 p.m. Eastern Time tonight, streaming live on Locked On Sports Today 24/7, YouTube, or the free Amazon Fire TV channels app. We are 8 days away from the first round, which is, absolutely incredible. So today we're doing the My Guys for the offensive side of this prospect pool. Went into the offensive line segment 1. Let's get into now the luxury picks for the Eagles, potentially a receiver. You could consider tight end maybe not a luxury pick, depending on how you feel about Dallas Goedert long term. Let's do exactly what we did with offensive line. Who's a day one receiver and a day one tight end for you that you pound the table for if the Eagles decide to take that route after they just locked up Devontae Smith?
Oh, that's difficult.
I think a tight end, maybe we'll just say two guys in general, because there's probably outside of Brock Bowers not a first-round pick.
Yeah, I mean, Brock is easily
so just two guys in general at tight end.
Yeah, I would say I'm in love with Ben Sinnott, man. I think it's just like kind of a plug-and-play almost for Dallas Goedert whenever you
feel like you're almost a Sinnott guy or a Sanders guy, right? There's just like after Bowers, I mean, both are good, but I think those are the two top guys.
Some people love Cade Stover. I'm not in love with Ohio State tight ends. I don't know.
Yeah.
You got to get rid of scouting the helmet, I know, but it's just one thing that, like Ben Sinnott, man, it's like you talk about what you want in a tight end, somebody who can play out wide, somebody who can play in line, somebody who can block, somebody who can catch. I know JT Sanders presents this crazy upside ability when it comes to the receiving game, but as a blocker, like I know what the Eagles are really like. They kind of almost prefer that you're a blocker over a receiving tight end to start your career.
Goddard was very good at blocking early on in his career.
And they didn't know if he was going to be a great blocker, and he comes out and he's just unbelievable at it. And I think Sinnott gives you that ability right away. We know that they but they drafted Dallas Goedert at the same age that he currently is now to replace Zach Ertz. And it's one of those positions that it's not a deep class. And if you really want to get like a game-changing type of player, you might have to land one of the top 6 or 7 guys in day 1 or day 2.
Yeah, and I'm a Sanders guy. I think, again, that you mentioned the receiving upside is why I like him as an option for 50th overall or 53. But as you mentioned, this class really is not that deep. And there's a player that I mentioned on our Bleacher Report show yesterday from Tight End University of Iowa. We've taken him, I think, once or twice on Mock Draft Monday, but I really like Eric Gino. If the Eagles are going to wait for day 3 to take a tight end to compete with CJ Uzoma and Albert O, Grant Calcaterra, Eric All's a player that's 6'4". I think he can play in line as a blocker and in the slot. A very good weapon over the middle with some run after the catch ability. I think if he wasn't so injured in college, he'd probably hire, because this really isn't that deep of a class.
No, and there's a couple guys we had at CGS. One in particular, Trayton Welch out of Wyoming. This kid, he tested pretty well, and you look at what Wyoming asks their tight ends to do. These are guys that can play H-back. They can go and sit and be a third wide receiver for you, or they can come in and block and do just about anything. And that's what this team is going to be looking for on day 3 when it comes to the tight ends, because I think the Grant Calcaterra approach in process, it made a lot of sense. Was he the right selection? Somebody that came out of retirement and has an injury history? I don't know.
No more firemen for the Eagles.
Yeah, no more fire. Stop drafting guys that were firemen.
Stop drafting them.
Yeah, if they were cop maybe, or some other form of public office, but you're going to get into that territory with tight end that if this guy is going to be drafted, Lou, he's going to have a legitimate chance to be that number 2 guy, regardless of where he's drafted. Like if Eric Alla comes in here, like you just said,
he might be the favorite at this point.
He might be. Yeah, he legitimately could be the favorite, and he could be the 171st pick in the NFL draft this year.
At wide receiver, you look at day 1. I don't know if this guy, I think he's fringe day 1, maybe early day 2, but I could see him squeaking in there at 20 to 32 because, again, once you get past the top 3 of, Harrison, Neighbors, Dunze, it's kind of pick your poison, like what style of receiver you want. If you want the deep threat that's bigger, like a Brian Thomas, that makes sense. Run after the catchability, like a Troy Franklin, or, the Lad McConkey, just technicians. Like there's so many different styles of receiver. But, when it comes to like the upside of a true X, I really like Xavier Legette from South Carolina. And I know he's only really had one huge year and he's kind of raw, but I love the physicality, the tough run after the catchability, really great body control along the sidelines. I'm not going to compare him to A.J. Brown, but stylistically...
I was just going to say, I hate comps, but man,
I do too.
Watch it and you can't not see him.
Right, I totally agree. I'm glad that you see it as well, because I was like, am I insane for saying he kind of reminds me of A.J. Brown?
There's one play, I forgot who it was, but on tape, like, he runs like a quick little screen into the middle of the field. There's 2 defenders just kind of like bracketing him, and he gets it, and he just splits these guys. And it's like, I've seen AJ make that play more times than I could count. And I'm with you I hate the comps, but the physicality element, if you want to go true big people beat up little people, Chip Kelly-esque, why not go big slot, man? Like they've tried this approach before. J.J. Arcega-Whiteside, did the process make sense? Yes. Did the selection work? Absolutely not. I'm with you on a guy like Xavier Legette.
Yeah, and I don't know if he's going to produce like instantly at the same level of like a Lad McConkey, who might be a more of a floor player. But I think of those guys later in the first round, Gino, that could truly develop into a X number 1 receiver, like he has those tools.
That's why the round 1 discussion for wide receivers is always difficult, because in your mind and my mind, it's like if you're drafting him in round 1 or trading away a pick, you're hoping that this guy is a true X, can win one-on-one, can be the guy that can beat anybody. But at the same time, Peter Schrager had this guy in his first round mock, and Peter Schrager's pretty connected. Jalen Polk, man, like
underrated.
I hate that I'm talking about all these freaking.
I know. Look at you hyping up the Huskies, Mr. Oregon Duck,
dude. But like you talk about like the true quote unquote slot receiver, like you think a traditional slot,
dude. He screams Tyler Boyd. I'm sorry to keep doing comps, but I just feel like he's going to give you 700 to 900 yards every single year, no doubt.
Like Roman Wilson, I have such a hard time thinking that he couldn't put up 600 yards for you every single season, minimum being the number 3 guy for you. And it really is walk into the ice cream store. What is your cup of tea? You don't like chocolate? Well, hey, here's some vanilla. You don't like vanilla? Well, here's some birthday cake, especially at wide receiver, man. And you can get really late into day 3. And I
was going to say, who's your John Hightower this year? Do you have one?
Who's my John Hightower this year? That's a real.
I think everybody knows mine because I won't stop taking him in our mock drafts, but Jaquan Jackson from Tulane's my guy.
I could think either of the Washingtons, Taj or Malik Washington, they were both at the Shrine Bowl. It's like they both put up really good weeks there. They weren't the number 1 receivers at either of their school. Like you're going to see these guys probably fit into a role, which is the 4th best guy. But at the same time, man, these kids can fly. Like they can fly downfield. And I want to maybe get that element, man, that you were missing with Quez Watkins, that like you can push the ball downfield, but somebody's got to have some stickum on their hands to be able to catch that thing and bring it down. So either of those guys, like I'm not in love with the Brendan Rice idea. Like the name sounds good. I don't love like the production. I mean, the Aiyana Smith, like I get it. Like it makes sense. The Johnny Wilsons of the world, like there's a lot.
Devontae that's Walker, definitely. How did I forget? Johnny Wilson's my guy. I mean, 6'5".
A lot of people like Tez Walker. Like I don't like guys that can't catch the football.
Well, he's very Quez Watkins based, where I believe in his ability to separate down the field, Gino, but the hands are a huge problem with Tez. Yeah, if he could catch, he'd probably be a 2nd or 3rd round pick.
I think to the Shelton Gibson quote that was in that one article that's like, oh, how he walks out onto the field, the positional coach looks at how he's like, oh, yeah, good pick. You just can't catch. It's like, oh, great. Your wide receiver can't catch the football.
But I'm glad you mentioned Johnny Wilson. I just can't help myself. I know it normally doesn't work out, but when a guy is 6'5", 6'6" like that and just towering, and maybe you don't go tight end early and you want that inline, like Y type of player, Johnny Wilson's a guy, again, you got to separate a little bit, but when you have such a huge catch radius like that and you could just box people out, again, I'm not picking him to be your 1 or 2, but for the Eagles, again, from
Whiteside,
exactly, I know, but the Eagles drafted J.J. Arcega-Whiteside in the 2nd round to be your eventual 1 or 2. Johnny Wilson for me is like a Swiss Army knife role player that you're going to get on day 3 most likely. So kind of like Jaquan Jackson, I like that idea later on in the draft. All right, Gino, let's switch sides. We're going to go to a less important combo of positions for the Eagles because they're set with Jalen Hurts and Saquon Barkley, but nonetheless, they could still take a development player at these positions later on. Quarterback and running back, my guys, coming up next. Today's episode of the Locked On Eagles podcast, we're sponsored by Monopoly Go. We've all been there, either as a player or a fan. It's halftime. The scoreboard, it's not looking good. You're feeling low, not sure you or your team can pull out a win. That's when you got to dig deep, lift your head up and say to yourself, time to get back in the game, pull off some bank heists, and take as much of my friends' money as I possibly can. That's right. The smash hit mobile game Monopoly Go lets you compete with your friends to get the most riches and the biggest empire. It's the Monopoly you love, but on your phone anytime with tons of new twists, including leaderboards to compare your progress to your buddies. There's so much to do. You can play on countless dynamic Monopoly boards, make your friends bankrupt by smashing their landmarks with a wrecking ball, charge other players rent for your iconic properties. You could even work with your friends to crack open community chests and in tournaments to get extra rewards and climb the leaderboard. So get back out there, put on your game face, and download Monopoly Go, now free on the App Store or on Google Play. All right, Gino, we're wrapping up the offensive side of our My Guys series. We'll go with defense tomorrow. Finishing things up with quarterback and running back because, again, like they have Jalen Hurts locked up. He's the franchise guy. No questions about that as of right now. Running back Saquon Barkley locked up to a 3-year deal. You do still have Kenneth Gainwell, who's going to have a role in this offense this year, even though I'm reluctant about that. But I will say, day 3, the Eagles tend to go with development players at quarterback. Tanner McKee, Clayton Thorson. You mentioned yesterday they gave Carson Strong a lot of money as an undrafted rookie a couple years ago, and although it didn't work, the dude barely played in the preseason. But nonetheless, they invest later on at quarterback. And at running back, you can make the argument because without Boston Scott, like they're pretty thin at this position. I think for running back, it's kind of like tight end, where I don't know if there's a day 1 type of player you can say is a my guy. But, Gino, is there a player on day 2 or day 3 that you like in the backfield?
I don't think there's like the underrated guys where you're going to see some name pop up and you're like, who the hell is that? But like a Marshawn Lloyd, like it makes so much sense. He visits the Eagles yesterday. He's explosive. Can he catch the ball 100%?
Yeah.
Local
violent
kid,
runner too.
Violent runner.
You could make the argument he's RB1 in this class, man.
Yeah. You can make the argument for any of these backs. Like, just give me a good set of film and give me a good argument, and you can make that selection all day in the 2nd round. Now, the Eagles, are they going to do that? No, they're going to probably wait until day 3 or day 4. But we said this name. I don't know if it was Bleacher Report yesterday or on this show, but like, what about Sione Vaki, where you could draft a kid to play both safety and running back?
That'd be cool. Like, when was the last time they had somebody playing on both sides of the ball?
Let's get back to 1940s football, man. And Sione Vaki is a violent runner of the football, man. Like, you talk about somebody who runs the ball like they
probably return now too, like in the with the new kickoff return rules.
Yes,
like,
he can return the football, Lou. Like, those are the type of things you got to start to think about with these back end players. Like, are you
your version of Taysom Hill to a degree? Just playing different positions, you know.
I think there is a guy in this class. He was at CGS, Rocky Lombardi, the quarterback, who was at a million different schools, who probably will get like Keaton Slovis / type of Taysom Hill comparisons. But yeah, let's hope that they don't get a Taysom Hill to throw the. I don't want to take the ball out of Jalen Hurts' hands. But
no, I agree.
Sione Vaki, man, like, why not have a do-it-all type of guy? Because with Kenny Gainwell, it's great. Like, the idea is great to draft a guy in that 5th round. Bring him in. I think you got more than you expected out of his rookie role.
Sure.
But outside of the first 2 downs or maybe your 3rd down back, like what is his role elsewhere on that football field? Like Bucky, you can give me a role for that kid on all 3 phases.
I was going to say all 3 phases.
Spot.
I think I like, again, day 3. I mean, day 2, like you mentioned, Marshawn Lloyd, one of the top 3 running backs in this class. I love Jalen Wright's speed. But again, those guys will probably go too early for where I'm willing to take a running back for the Eagles. If this guy can slip into day 3, I love his style. Like he's a smaller, but like a bowling ball, like very powerful build, and just has such natural hands. Kentucky running back Ray Davis. I just feel like if there's going to be a guy on day 3, and there's these players every year that instantly compete and produce at this level in the NFL at running back that was a late round pick, I think Ray Davis could be one of those guys. Like I love his hands, and for his build, you wouldn't think he's like an amazing receiving back, but I think he's a player that can play on all 3 downs and can probably pass protect pretty well too.
Pass protection. That's the element that you really need, man. Like, and why was Kenny on the field a lot of the time when he probably shouldn't have been?
They didn't trust Sanders and Swift to pass protect, yeah.
And Kenny at least found a role that the team trusted him with, right? And that's why I love the idea of Bucky. It's like, can he pass protect all the time? I don't know, but who else can do that? Like somebody who played safety and is willing and able for sure. And Ray Davis, talk about just taking Kenny Gainwell out of the equation completely. Like, I don't think he would have a role on this team anymore if you get him after adding Saquon Barkley as well.
Well, because Saquon's a great pass protector too, Gino.
How long is this team going to keep 4 running backs on the team for? Like, I don't see that being the trend going forward.
Well, not after, especially investing in Saquon, who's going to have such a bigger role than what you're used to. I think they probably carry 3.
One of the things that what they're doing isn't the way to go about it, but like Dallas has been doing that where they're only kind of keeping 2 running backs and they have that 3rd guy kind of like on the practice. The Eagles you don't need to keep 4 running backs.
Normally, traditionally, Gino, with Andy Reid, Doug Peterson, even Chip Kelly, like normally they kept 3. Doug at the end kept 4, but for the most part, growing up as an Eagles fan, it was 3 guys.
I just don't think they had the guys and the roles filled that they wanted to the last couple of years, where you're like, oh, Rashad Penny is active on game days, but doing nothing for you.
Yeah.
You don't need that anymore. You need guys that are actually going to play. And Ray Davis, I think that would be a really good idea to add him. And people are going to hate it, but I got to mention one Oregon Duck, like Bucky Irving, man.
Yeah.
Like
I was waiting for you to mention Irving. Yeah.
He faced, I think it was the 3rd highest amount out of any running back draftee of 8+ man boxes. And he succeeded in the middle of the field, just making guys bounce off of tackles. And is he a great athlete? Not by any stretch of the imagination. But if you need somebody that can pound the ball when a guy like Saquon isn't there, I think he's going to go a lot lower than he should have because of that testing. And I had to mention one Oregon Duck before today.
No, I love it. All right, let's finish up with quarterback. This is a guy probably to no surprise of my guy. He is so raw at this position. Don't know if he'll ever develop, but everybody knows me. I'm a traits guy. Give me on day 3 a 6'5" player who has a 75-yard arm and can whip it whenever he wants and can run. I know, Gino, you're not a Joe Milton guy. I just think this late in the draft, like, take a flyer on the traits. I don't know. It depends on what you're looking for, but I guarantee you, like, the Indianapolis Colts are going to take Joe Milton, like, to, be on that roster. Like, they love this kind of player. I think it's just, I don't know. It's worth a shot later on. Like, just give me the traits.
Joe
Milton's so raw, though, man.
He's going to be inaccurate great in Canada in like 3 years. He's going to be unbelievable throwing just like backside over routes in Canada. But
who's your guy?
It makes sense. It makes a lot of sense. It's like, I think Tanner McKee is going to be the number 2. Like, clearly, I mean, do they want to bring in somebody to compete? I think they're going to.
Well, they have Kenny Pickett. Remember, too. Yeah.
When I say number 2, I mean like the number 2 behind Jalen Hurts. My fault, but Jordan Travis is intriguing. It's really intriguing because of the injury, but the Eagles haven't shied away from quarterbacks with injuries. Like, look at Carson Strong. I mean, he had a knee that was made out of dental floss, and they went and got him. But Jordan Travis, baller, gamer, like can do it. I think he's a poor man's Spencer Rattler in this class, where Spencer probably is going to maybe be the 6th or 7th quarterback off the board. I was going to say, on
day 2, he's probably the first quarterback off depending on what happens with Penix and Nix. I think Rattler's that next guy after your big 6 that goes.
But you talk about day 3, like Jordan Travis, I mean, he was going to be competing for a national championship if he doesn't get hurt, and he puts together this great season with Florida State. And on that day 3, like, are you going for traits, or do you want guys that can have played and been in that room and been in a meaningful quarterback situation. And Tanner McKee, he was kind of the traitsy guy, and they kind of got that guy, like that 6'5". I can't wait to watch him play in the preseason next year, by the way. Like, that was electric what we got out of him.
He lit up. And, you know, there's been such bad quarterback play over the years in the preseason that McKee was a breath of fresh air. And I just mean in general, like Joe Milton, I'm not expecting the Eagles to take him in this draft, but I just like that. Again, it's such a crapshoot at quarterback this late anyway that give me that giant dude that can run and can throw it 75 yards on his knees. I mean, the guy can't hit a side of a barn right now with his accuracy, but worth a shot for sure. Gino, tomorrow we've got defensive my guys, which can't wait for it. Eagles need a lot of defensive help in this draft, so we'll get into that. We thank you so much for making Locked On Eagles your first listen today and every day. For Gino Camilleri, I'm Lou DiBiase signing off. We'll see you tomorrow. As always, thanks so much for downloading, watching, and listening, and let's go Birds.
Fly, Eagles, fly.